We are back on the Zero Hour. I am RJ Eskow, and today we debut a new feature on the program, a feature in which producer Bradley Herring and I discuss some of the news stories of the day and just kind of try to break them down a little bit. We haven't come up with a name for this segment yet. We're tentatively calling it Breaking the News, but I feel in the back of my head that maybe somebody's using that somewhere. So we're going to crowdsource at some point, let you guys, you can tweet us at TZHRJ, which stands for the Zero Hour with RJ Eskow, and tell us if you got a better idea. But for now, we'll call it Breaking the News. And so Brad Herring joins us now. So, Brad, what's in the news?
Well, the lead news of this week, of course, is Kevin McCarthy. He's a House Majority Leader widely expected to take the next step and replace retiring John Boehner as Speaker. He dramatically dropped out of the race this week as the GOP caucus vote was scheduled to take place. Representatives were overheard openly crying in the Capitol building, and the entire caucus was thrown into chaos. And here's Kevin McCarthy addressing the press.
We've been going through this campaign, talking to a lot of members, but the one thing I've always said to earn this majority, we're servants. We should put this conference first. And I think there's something to be said for us to unite. We probably need a fresh face.
We probably need a fresh face. Reports of why he's dropping out range from being able to count on support from the hardline GOP Freedom Caucus to some darker alleged insinuations of marital infidelity. Left to be seen as the impact this will have on the debt limit negotiations this November. However, hysterically, Newt Gingrich has offered himself up for the job on Sean Hannity's show.
You know, it is true, Brad, that you do not have to be a sitting member. This is my understanding. You do not have to be a sitting member of the House of Representatives in order to serve as Speaker of the House. So it opens it up to anybody that might want it. Newt Gingrich. Somebody suggested Pope Francis, although the Republicans weren't very receptive to his message the last time around. It's not likely they will be again. It could be pretty much anybody. Toby Keith, the Kardashian, one of the Kardashians. Anybody could theoretically take the job.
Are you interested in it? If called, will you serve?
I will serve. Yes, I absolutely will serve because these people don't seem to get along with one another, and so maybe somebody has to come in from outside their world in order to take it over. But, you know, it is fascinating. It was an absolute shock here in Washington, D.C. when Kevin McCarthy did not take the job. It is true that there were stories about a potential infidelity, but it did not appear as if that was necessarily the cause. As you said, it could be that he couldn't find the support of the so-called Freedom Caucus. I think what it's come down to is that the Republicans may have, in fact, become ungovernable, that the presence of these Tea Party radicals, I think, you know, the old Chinese saying, he who rides the tiger cannot dismount. The Republican Party wanted to capitalize on Tea Party fervor to win seats, and now they can't control their own Tea Party members. And it may be that we're in for some wild, interesting, and disturbing months ahead.
I cannot wait. And a lot of that is going to have to do with the debt fight, with the debt limit fight that's coming up in November. And speaking of that fight, a major presidential candidate didn't seem to know what that is, which is a little disturbing. Here's the flavor of the month, Ben Carson, in an interview with Kai Ristall of Marketplace, struggling to differentiate the budget from the already incurred debt.
All right, so let's talk about debt then and the budget. As you know, Treasury Secretary Lew has come out in the last couple of days and said, we're going to run out of money. We're going to run out of borrowing authority on the 5th of November. Should the Congress then and the President not raise the debt limit? Should we default on our debt?
Let me put it this way. If I were the President, I would not sign an increased budget. Absolutely would not do it. They would have to find a place to cut.
To be clear, it's increasing the debt limit, not the budget. But I want to make sure I understand you. You'd let the United States default rather than raise the debt limit.
No, I would provide kind of leadership that says, get on the stick, guys, and stop messing around and cut where you need to cut, because we're not raising any spending limits, period.
I'm going to try one more time, sir. This is debt that's already obligated. Would you not favor increasing the debt limit to pay the debts already incurred?
What I'm saying is what we have to do is restructure the way that we create debt. I mean, if we continue along this, where does it stop? It never stops. You're always going to ask the same question every year. And we're just going to keep going down that pathway. That's one of the things I think that people are tired of.
I'm really trying not to be circular here, Dr. Carson, but if you're not going to raise the debt limit and you're not going to give specifics on what you're going to cut, then how are we going to know what you would do as President of the United States?
It's really disturbing. It reminds me of a headline from The New Yorker. I don't know if you saw it, but Andy Borowitz. The headline was Ben Carson shattering stereotype of brain surgeons being smart.
Right. There was another cartoon, his horrific comments about gun violence, where he said gun victims, including children, should rush the shooter and sacrifice their lives in order to stop him. And there was a cartoon that showed him saying, people should rush anybody who's creating havoc, and then in the background you saw Republicans rushing him. The fact is, look, Ben Carson, in a way, is an intriguing character because from all reports, he is a brilliant and extremely gifted neurosurgeon, but it makes you wonder. I don't want to be disrespectful, but it makes you wonder about the concept of the kind of idiot savant who's brilliant at one thing and clueless in other things. But the other defining characteristic, and I hope I don't offend some of my doctor friends with this, but a lot of doctors, and especially highly paid specialists, get to be, shall we say, highly self-confident, and they assume that their skills are translatable into all spheres. And Ben Carson may have just felt, well, he's such a brilliant neurosurgeon that he doesn't have to study up on government in order to be president. I don't know, but he is fascinating. In some ways, he does seem very intelligent. He's very soft-spoken, which is appealing. But I don't know. I can't get a read on the guy, except one thing's for sure, which is he's neither qualified nor particularly interested in fulfilling the duties of President of the United States.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how these recent screw-ups, gaffes, whatever you want to call them, are reflected in his poll numbers, which have been trending upward.
I don't think his followers particularly care whether he understands what the debt limit is or not, but we'll find out.
That's a fair point. So the next bit of news, a deal was reached this week on the controversial TransPacific Partnership, a vast trade agreement between nations bordering the Pacific Ocean, such as the U.S., Canada, Australia, Japan, and Chile. Dave Johnson from the Campaign for America's Future is going to join us on the show later in the hour to discuss it in a bit more depth, but I wanted to hit it here. The agreement still needs to pass in the U.S. Congress, where it faces a weird kind of bipartisan resistance. Presidential candidate this week, Hillary Clinton, came out in opposition to the pact after previously voicing pretty robust support for it, calling it, quote, the gold standard in trade agreements.
Now, she did not, to be clear, she did not say that when she voiced opposition to it this week. She had said that at some point in the past.
That's correct.
Well, look, first of all, I always preface any remarks about the presidential election by saying I work for Senator Bernie Sanders, so weigh my words accordingly. Look, on the one hand, I'm glad she's come aboard and opposes this deal. On the other hand, I wish she'd done it when the Senate was when they were voting on fast track privilege, which weights the process very heavily in favor of its passage. Her opposition then would have been substantial. Now, she has explained her change of heart, or seeming change of heart, by saying that she had standards, and now that we know a little bit more about the treaty, she feels it doesn't meet those standards. Now, I'm not sure that anything we've learned between then and now has changed, but that is her explanation, and to be fair to her, she is saying it is not an inconsistency.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people are comparing it sort of unfavorably to her same-sex marriage flip-flop, and that this is just politically expedient, which I'm not going to read anything into it, but it does seem to be expedient in this case.
I have heard people say that. So what else you got?
All right, so this is going to be a little bit disturbing. You kind of previewed that earlier. Last week's mass shooting at Umpqua Community College near Roseburg, Oregon, provoked the typical blame everything but the gun response from the Republican Party. There's an excellent piece on TPM by Jason Stanton about this. Many blamed cracks in the mental health system, which is kind of the go-to for a lot, which it's not like they've actually worked to increase funding for mental health, but that's neither here nor there. Ted Cruz blamed gun-free zones, even though the college itself was not one. and is not one. In a throwback, Bobby Jindal blamed violent video games, but two of them stood out from the pack. Here is our buddy Ben Carson blaming the victims.
But Dr. Carson, if a gunman walks up and puts a gun at you and says, "What religion are you?" that is the ultimate test of your faith.
I'm glad you asked that question, because not only would I probably not cooperate with him, I would not just stand there and let him shoot me. I would say, "Hey guys, everybody attack him. He may shoot me, but he can't get us all."
Take action.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Hopefully you won't have to have that happen.
Dr. Carson.
See, what's so profoundly, and I have to say this, I've been tried to be fair to Dr. Carson earlier, but what's so really despicable, I think, about this comment is that it's blaming the victims of the shooting. And that's, to me, unforgivable. What's next? Do we blame kindergartners? I mean, you know, the notion that people will do or say anything in order to avoid the fact that we need sensible gun legislation in this country is really shameful. And, of course, we did have Chris Mintz, the U.S. Army veteran. He stood up to the shooter, was shot 7 times. Fortunately, he survived. But the point being, even though we had at least one person doing that, the shooter did shoot a lot of people. So... first, tell us, have other Republicans been as crazy as Carson on this one?
Well, there's, of course, Bobby Jindal. First of all, I wanted to say that laugh at the end that Ben Carson gave was kind of horrifying.
Right.
At the end of that clip. Yeah, I want to get that in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bobby Jindal had a really bizarre and kind of angry tirade on a blog where he lashed out at the shooter's father in a really long post. The gunman's father, who hadn't raised his son. His son had been living with his mother for quite some time, and his mother provided a lot of the guns, from what I understand. The gunman's father has since called for stricter regulations on firearms in the wake of the massacre. But here is some of Jindal's response. He said, quote, "This killer's father is now lecturing us on the need for gun control, and he says he has no idea how or where his son got the guns. Of course he doesn't know. You know why he doesn't know? Because he is not and has never been in his son's life. He is a complete failure as a father. He should be embarrassed to even show his face in public. He's the problem here." And if you have the stomach for it, we can keep going.
No, don't go. Don't keep going. Look,
Okay.
again. Look, these guys will do or say anything in order to avoid the fact that we need sensible gun legislation. And let me say here, by the way, that I've used guns myself. I am not reflexively anti-gun. But I do feel, and I feel that a lot of gun owners and gun users agree with me. I think that most people think we need sensible gun control legislation in this country, and I do think we also have to stop glorifying violence in the many ways that we do. I think there are many things we must do. I think we need a national initiative which includes proper licensing and registration and background checks and all that. Also includes educating ourselves as a nation, a national conversation about why gun violence isn't the solution. But these guys will never do that because they want to win the nomination of their party, and to do that they have to win over a hardcore crew of people who think that you need to carry a gun in order to mount an insurrection against the federal government. And that's it. Once you make that bargain with the devil because you want to be a presidential nominee, you lose my respect.
Why do you think this one has gotten more of a response than previous shootings, if you want to get into that? I know just, was it 2 months ago, we had 2 news people killed on camera by a gunman, and that didn't get anywhere near the amount of traction in the media, the response. We've had Australia, there's a group in Australia urging a boycott of people traveling to the United States because of our gun problem. It seems like this one has caught the media focus and the attention of the public more so than recent shootings. And I wanted to pick your brain as to why that might be the case.
Well, there could be a couple reasons for it. One, the election is heating up, so it's more of a political issue in this country, so it's getting more coverage here and abroad. And 2, sadly, more people died. 3, the last shooting took place during the sort of doldrums of summer. So, I think it's a variety of reasons, but, it's shameful to me that after the shooting of the children in Newtown, we didn't do anything about it. I'm glad there's a conversation at least going on about it now, and I hope some good comes of it.
Absolutely, agree with you on that. Let's get to our last story, and this is one that's going to have some ripples throughout the rest of this year and next. The latest session of the Supreme Court began this week. It traditionally starts on the first Monday in October. The court appears poised this year to tackle issues the outcome of which will likely be far less rosy for progressives than last terms, when the court upheld Obamacare and legalized full marriage equality. On the docket this session is affirmative action, union representation, religious exemptions for contraceptive coverage, and for the first time since 2007, abortion will come before the Supreme Court. What are your thoughts? What's your preview of how things look for the Supreme Court this term?
Well, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, I tremble for my country when I consider the possibility that God is just. I tremble for my country to think about what this Supreme Court is capable of doing. I think, in a sense, on many of these issues, the most powerful person in the country is not the President of the United States. It is Justice Kennedy. And I think that a lot of it will come down to what the swing vote on the court decides to do, because I think we now have a 4-vote hardcore ideological conservative minority that votes its ideology rather than the law. And I think that when you have that, then plus 4 reasonable people, you have a swing vote court that could determine, as you're right to point out, the economic future of millions of Americans, which is what union representation comes to, and this astonishing idea that that insurance coverage is an expression of the personal beliefs of the spiritual beliefs of a corporation blows my mind, but that apparently is coming up again. So it's, to say the least, troubling, and the only good news I can think of is that it's clear that this court is responsive to political pressure, because it is ideological. It doesn't. I think John Roberts knows if he oversteps his bounds, there could be repercussions he doesn't want. So I think people need to make their feelings on these issues very well known.
I totally agree, and that's all we got for the news.
All right. Well, we will be right back after this with more. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.